Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Power Women Summit. I'm Tamron Hall, the host of the Tamron Hall Show. I am also the mother of an awesome 19-month-old, far better than hosting a daily talk show. But I'm excited to participate in what I know will be an inspirational and really riveting conversation with other moms, women who are the forefront of organizations that are impacting change in our world. That even in this uncertain time, they reassure me that we are headed in the right direction, even on the days where it feels that time is standing still. So I am eager to introduce our panel and learn some more from them. Let me start off with Simona Grace. Simona is founder of Moms in Office, a political organization dedicated to electing and supporting moms running for office. Most recently, Simona was named California's Mother of the Year 2020. I cannot wait to learn what the Mom of the Year in California gets. Congratulations, Simona. That's amazing. Renowned digital influencer and entrepreneur Chriselle Lim is the co-founder of Bümo Work, a co-working space with licensed childcare, and the online community Bümo Parent. In response to COVID, she launched Bümo Brain, an online education site. She also hosts a podcast, Being Bümo. Congratulations, Chriselle. Thank you so much for being here. Next, we have Ajin Pu, the director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, co-director of Caring Across Generations, and co-founder of Supermajority. She's an award-winning organizer, best-selling author, Time 100 alumna, and a leading voice in the women's movement. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Next, we have Dr. Elisa Pressman, co-founding director and director of clinical programming for the Mount Sinai Parenting Center. Dr. Pressman is also known for her podcast, Raising Good Humans. I love that title, designed to help to make the journey of parenting a little less overwhelming. And last but not least, someone that I'm a fan of all of our panelists, but I'm especially a fan of Shannon Watts. Shannon is the founder of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, the nation's largest grassroots gun violence prevention group. She's also the author of Fight Like a Mother, how a grassroots movement took on the gun lobby and why women will change the world. Full disclosure, I read all of your bios because you've accomplished so much, and I wanted to get everything correct. Now, Real Talk. This is about us opening up on our journey as women, as moms. Let me start off with Dr. Pressman here. And part of being a talk show host is that you love talking about yourself. So I will start selfishly with the fact that here I am with a 18, 19-month-old who has not seen another adult or child in 9 months, other than myself, his dad, and nanny, and grandma briefly from afar. No contact. All moms and dads right now, especially those who are watching, are wondering what happens next. What is the impact of all of this on our children?
Well, first of all, congratulations. But I want to say kids are resilient. This is going to be fine. And, they're going to adapt and adjust. And I do think that's true for the children who have the right support system. What I can say, but we just don't know, I think a lot of people are giving I know answers when the real answer is, we don't actually have the answers. What we do know is that children under 3 really thrive in their tiny little bubble of a world. So actually, babies are living their best life if their parents are functioning. If they don't have the weight of the world on them, then they do have this time at home that is very unusual. So I think for the 0 to 19 month set, this is actually not as bleak as it seems. It's not great to not get to see faces. And so you want to make sure to have lots of interactions with faces at home because we need to see faces and eyes and communication and hear voices well. But that part of it, I would say for you, take heart because that's okay.
Now we have some of the kids out of the way and we have that news. As they say, if mama's not okay, nobody's okay in the house. So I'd like to transition to the real conversation, which is what you are doing to help other moms, other parents, and how you are helping yourselves in the process. Chriselle, you started another chapter of your success story in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of all of this. Was there a moment, I dare I say, I'll steal it from Oprah, was there an aha moment that you knew you could take things further and assert your power and continue to influence the dialogue here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we initially started Bümo to launch a physical space, which is to empower and inspire parents to be able to continue their career and while still being a present parent, so being co-located with their child. But then in the middle of all of that, in the middle of the build out, COVID happened. And so my co-founder and I, we looked at each other and we're like, what are we gonna do? Everything is stalled. At this point, we have to figure it out. And what was happening during that time was we were all homeschooling our kids. We were in these crazy Zoom calls with 20, 30 other kids talking over each other, these teachers that are just trying to retrofit their, traditional curriculum into a digital space now. It was very challenging. There was a huge learning curve. And then so my co-founder and I looked at each other and said, we have the curriculum that we've been building for our physical space. Why don't we try to figure out how we can launch this digitally and see if it works out? And so between my co-founder and I, we have 4 kids. And so we tested it on our kids and they lit up. And we said, okay, if our kids are excited about learning digitally through this curriculum, let's not be selfish and just have it to ourselves. Let's share it with the world. And so when we launched Bümo Brain in the middle of the pandemic, we felt crazy. We're like, is this going to work out? We don't know. Like, are people really going to need this? And the minute that we opened up the wait list, because we were just not sure of who would sign on, over 2,000 families across 50 countries were on our wait list. And that just showed us and proved to us that this was not just a COVID thing. This is an early childhood education thing. Only 5% of 3-year-olds have access to state-funded education. And so we realized that there was a lack of high-quality education in the early childhood space. So yeah, I mean, it was challenging in the middle of a pandemic to launch something brand new, but it really inspired us because we knew that we were helping so many parents out that needed it during these times.
Simona, let me bring you in as Chriselle is expanding her business model to help parents and igniting that. Here we watched women from around the country, the voice of the people, if you will, ignited through politics. Your focus, Moms in Office, launched in, saw the need and the awareness to have more women be heard in political spaces. How were you impacted initially by this pandemic?
I'm a single mom, so to say that I was impacted doesn't even cut it, right? Definitely have been impacted in my life trying to just get through the day, but I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do so because I know so many women and moms who I speak to every day who do not have the option to work from home, who have lost jobs, who have to go to the grocery store and sometimes leave their children at home because they don't have an option. So truly, I wasn't impacted in the way that my everyday life changed to the point that I've seen for so many working moms. I was impacted in a way that I have to just go back to the drawing board and see what I can get done with my son and with my organization. So as far as our work is going, raising money for moms who are running for office, we were not able to have any events this year. We're not able to meet a lot of our supporters in person. So we actually changed our entire approach to online grassroots fundraising and small dollar donations through our email list and social media outreach. And in a way, it was so surprising to me that the plan that we had at the beginning of the year to have great events, political events, to bring people together, to talk to our supporters and ask for their support, turned into reach thousands of people across the country who had an extra $5 to give because they saw exactly what I've been seeing with these working moms who are unlike me, had no choice but to show up to work and figure out what to do with their children. They saw this reality, and so many people came out to support us. Even sometimes when they send messages to me and said, I love what you're doing. We need more moms in office. We need their voices at the policy-making table, so we don't have to live through these challenges. But I don't have a lot of money. I'm going to wait for my next paycheck and send you $10 for your organization, so you can give it to these moms running for office. So I would say, yes, my personal life was impacted as a mom, just trying to get through the day. My organization had to go back to the drawing board and figure out another way to approach fundraising. But what we have encountered going through that has been amazing. The amount of support from people across the country who care about working moms, who care about making a difference for working moms. You know, these were not the wealthy donors in politics. These were just everyday moms, dads, grandparents who saw everyone struggling and believed in my mission. So that has been just so touching for me to see what we're able to do through coming together.
I think it's beautiful how both your story and Chriselle, you thread through with your own personal experience, but also recognizing the need to help other parents, other women during this time. Shannon, I will bring you in. What was the immediate, I don't know if that's a fair question, because there are so many incoming things at one time. You have political unrest, you have the election, there's so many things, and you're juggling your family. So I'm sure there wasn't one big moment of change, but when did you feel that you had a good grip on things, balancing the home and expanding the voice of the moms who are demanding that we take the conversation of guns more seriously in this country?
Yeah, you know, I started Moms Demand Action as a Facebook page, and we have spent the last now almost 8 years really investing in technologies that enable our volunteers to be grassroots activists from anywhere. And a lot of companies or organizations give that technology to their leaders. We give it to every single volunteer. So we kind of pivoted pretty seamlessly, but we learned a lot. I can remember sitting in my house in March, and we were supposed to have what we call an advocacy day. We have one in every state every year, and thousands, hundreds or thousands of volunteers show up. And we had the most RSVPs ever in California this year. We were all going to show up in Sacramento. And in the very last hours, we had to pivot and decide to make that an online advocacy day where we would Zoom in and meet with our lawmakers, really something we hadn't used Zoom for before. And it was amazing because even more people participated than had RSVP'd. And I think what we learned and what we're learning is that technology enables us to be even more equitable and inclusive, and that we'll never go back to doing things the way we did, right? It's not that easy to get from San Diego to Sacramento, but it is Zoom in during a lunch meeting and have your voice heard. So I think it was in that moment when we were able to do that advocacy day and the lessons we've learned along the way about how to be grassroots activists, and certainly during the election cycle, how to get out the vote and do it from our homes. And that's been, I think that's been a pivotal change for grassroots activism in general.
Jen, let me bring you in because you are there firsthand working with some of the very women that Simona mentioned, domestic workers. I mean, we talk about the access or the ability to pivot in all of what we do. My show was taped for a long period of time from here with an iPad, but that's a luxury, as Simona pointed out. That is not an option for so many of our sisters. And I consider us all in this together. What did you see early on that you perhaps believe we were not addressing, and that what we can address more as relates to domestic workers especially?
Well, I think, before there was a pandemic, there was an epidemic of low-wage work in America that disproportionately affected women, especially women of color, right? 2/3 of all minimum wage jobs are held by women and majority moms, and disproportionately women of color, like domestic workers. And for domestic workers, 82% of domestic workers came into the pandemic without a single paid sick day. And as you mentioned, it's not the kind of work that can be done remotely. And the whole point is to be present and in person to provide care. And so even before the shutdown or the stay-at-home orders came down, our members were reporting dramatic losses in jobs and income. 90% of domestic workers lost most or if not all of their income in the first month of the pandemic. And because the wages were so low, it wasn't like there was money to stock up on groceries or supplies. And so I remember in the early days of the pandemic, we would have Zoom calls with our members, and there was this one meeting where one of our members held up her phone to the camera to show us that there was literally 1 cent left in her bank account. And so it's been a really difficult time, full of impossible choices. Do I go out to work when my own kids need care? They need supervision for online learning, but I need to pay the bills and put food on the table. And how do I do so while staying safe? And there's so many care workers who are still working as our essential workers, like a critical lifeline to some of our aging parents, our loved ones with disabilities who need care just to live, and they're the lifeline. And so we haven't really protected them. They still don't have health care. They still don't have hazard pay. We still haven't passed an Essential Workers Bill of Rights. So it's been a crisis of impossible choices for workers like domestic workers who are not only caring as their jobs for our families, but caring for their own families under really impossible conditions. But I will say that I am actually very hopeful in this time because, before the pandemic, we kind of saw managing childcare or elder care as like a personal burden or responsibility. And if you struggled to figure out your childcare or afford it, it was some kind of failure of yours. You're somehow a bad mom or you're a bad daughter if you can't figure out elder care. And I think what the pandemic really revealed is that we are really in this together, that our caregiving experiences are universal, and we've been trying to struggle through it on our own, but we really need a collective solution. We need public policy solutions. We need a strong caregiving workforce. We need affordable childcare and elder care and paid leave. I mean, we have families even as we work, and we've never accounted for that in our public policy. And we finally have a moment to do that, to actually make childcare much more affordable and accessible and make care jobs good jobs. So I feel in a weird way, even though I've laid out a really grim reality in terms of what our members are facing right now, I actually feel hopeful that we can realize the change that we've needed for a long time.
I'm happy that you were present enough to recognize the list of things that my heart started to sink with each thing you named. And I thought about where I live now. Last year, we lived near a facility that feeds families in the area, maybe 5 people, 10. Now the line stretched 2 days ago down the street, around the corner, and I recognized most of the people in line were women.
Those are our sisters.
Maybe I was more conscious because I knew this panel was a letter to our children, and I specifically scanned and saw women. And we have ads that run, thankfully, to thank our frontline workers. But so often these women, especially in these jobs, are not recognized as the front line. But you gave us hope, and you believe that a curve correction really is on the way.
I do. We have a president-elect who made campaigning on a 21st century caregiving economy a core pillar of his economic agenda. Not the women's agenda, not the work-family balance agenda, but the core economic agenda, recognizing that we need to be investing in our caregivers and our caregiving system in a wholly different way, and that is good for the economy, right? And so there is a whole plan that I hope will be realized in short order, because we needed it like yesterday, to make childcare much more affordable and accessible, expand access to elder care in the home and community, and to make our caregiving jobs living wage jobs with benefits and real economic security.
Dr. Pressman, let me bring you in. The I guess, sub-intention, if you will, of this panel is a letter to my children. At this day, how would you start that letter?
That's just making me well up at the thought of that. I think I would start by saying, thank you, and I'm sorry for what you've had to go through, and I'm excited to learn what happened for you and go from there. Because
No, please go ahead. Please, I'm so sorry.
I was just, in thinking about that, this is unlike so many times, like we don't have wisdom necessarily to impart. I think we're all collecting new wisdom as we go moving through this experience. And so in this letter, there has to be some kind of way of inviting the wisdom that the experience of our kids have had. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but I think you guys get what I meant. And it's important. We don't have that wisdom, but we do have presence, and that's something that we can control.
When we look at, again, going back to either the scales somehow will become a bit more balanced or they will skew in a direction I think none of us want. I think about a young girl that I interviewed from a shelter with her mother the first week of the pandemic. Get on a hot spot that belonged to one of the social workers at the shelter because she could not log on to do her homework. And then later that evening, I watched nightly news, and there was a piece celebrating a school in Maine that was ahead of the curve, that recognized the need for high-speed internet, but the average income, honestly, of the children's parents, top, I don't know, $300,000, $400,000, if not more a year. Basically, it was an affluent school. Will we be able to finally somehow balance the inequality, not workers and what women pay, but how our children are treated in the education system? Have we started a realistic conversation with what we know now at this point?
Well, that is my biggest fear about this pandemic. Mental health is also obviously top of mind, but in terms of education, we already have a massive gap between the kids who come from high income families and the kids who do not. And now, without the resources and the Wi-Fi and the ability to have education, and that the support is so much worse. And then you have kids in higher income communities who are getting tripling down on support because their parents might even be able to be doing homework with them that they were never looking at before, or they're so concerned about their academic movement that they're more involved than they were before. And so I think the gap actually is going to get wider and wider, and that is my biggest concern, that we need to focus on that for our kids, or this will be irreparable damage.
Shannon, let me bring you in another problem that we have not been able to solve, a huge, a fatal, a deadly one. The conversation on guns, the advancing of legislation, even after Newtown, and other massive grenades, if you will, that have gone off in our society as it relates to this topic. Does it get lost with our focus now on unemployment, on the lack of work? I saw a story, at the beginning of the pandemic, gun sales were up just as people were losing their jobs.
It's really up to us to make sure that that doesn't get lost. You are exactly right. We know that the COVID crisis is exacerbating gun violence in this country. Women are trapped at home alone with domestic abusers who have easy access to guns. Millions of kids are unexpectedly at home from school, again, with easy access to guns. Most school shooters in this country are actually students who find guns in their homes. We know people are struggling with suicidal ideation because they are isolated or they're worried about their economic welfare. Again, they have easy access to guns. And we're seeing spikes in city gun violence. And that's in part because violence interruption programs that do such an amazing job year round aren't able to get out and create these relationships and have these conversations. And frankly, because their funding is going by the wayside as we budget in COVID times. So we are working hard to shine a spotlight on all of that. It's another reason I'm very happy that we have Vice President-elect Biden President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris coming into power. And that's because I believe they're going to make this a priority. They've said that this will be something they work on in the first 100 days. And look, regardless of what happens in Georgia in January, there are a lot of different executive actions that they can take as a team to help relieve some of the suffering that's happening in this country because of gun violence.
So let's talk about the extending from what Ajahn discussed regarding childcare, our focus on parenting. You have a co-working space with licensed childcare. I remember, again, I'm 50 now, back in the 90s, reporting on all the companies now adding childcare to their facilities. And then suddenly that number started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Where is the conversation now as we continue to ask, especially women, how they balance it all?
Yeah, well, I love this question because you never ask a man, how do you balance it all, right?
I make that point every time an interviewer asks me about how do you do it with the job of the day, I think when you ask my coworker that's a man, I'll answer that. So we know, though, they keep asking. Exactly. But fewer people keep answering about the childcare component of it and come up with creative solutions as you have.
Yes, and this is a really great point because also big companies, which is a big target for Bümo, is to allow their employees, whether it's moms, whether it's dad, majority is going to be moms, but giving them the option, because at a certain point in a woman's career, she has to make the binary decision of, okay, do I continue my career or do I decide to continue to be a full-time mom? And that is just the reality of things. There's very little options at this point. So a lot of companies are realizing that now, and a lot of companies are realizing that it's really important to support women and to be able to have that women leadership. There's so many benefits of having women in leadership positions. And so a lot of companies are, not all, but forward-thinking companies are also thinking, okay, how do we support more women that are moms to enable them to work while having children around? So before it would be like, okay, you can just drop off your kids and we'll watch them. But now it's more of like, how do we empower the woman? How do we empower the mom to continue to have her down this path of her career? So that's been really exciting for us to see as we're working with so many large corporations that are signing on to this program, whether it be through our digital program virtually right now to support them while they're working from home, but also a lot of companies that are signing on to our physical location to be able to support them also to be able to do both physically.
Simona, I want to transition to how all of our panelists are handling some of these conversations in the home. Obviously, your focus on the election and getting more women in office. How are you handling that in the home? How are you talking about it with your family and children?
I think my son has no choice but to always be in the middle of this. He's actually really excited and so proud of me with everything that I'm doing. So he just knows so much about paid leave and caregiving and the crisis that women are facing, because oftentimes he'd be sitting next to me when I'm having these conversations, or even before COVID, he would be next to me on stage while I'm giving a talk or I'm hosting a panel. And I wanted to be really intentional about this because I wanted to normalize this image of having our children next to us as we are pursuing professional careers. And so right now, my son at home is very much in the middle of this. I think some of the conversations with him that have been especially difficult for me now during this election and even before is the fact that his vision of America is not the vision of America that I had when I immigrated to this country after I left the communist country, and I moved here to pursue my education as an 18-year-old, not speaking English with one suitcase. And I moved here because of the promise of this country. I moved here because I believed in our democracy and the chances that this country gives to everyone. So my vision of America is this vision of America, that everything is possible. But my son's vision of America is Donald Trump's America, because he's 10 years old and all he remembers is the last 4 years of living under this president who has not been a role model for any of us, especially for children. So the challenge for me has been this, to look into my son's eyes and tell him this is the greatest country in the world. And I actually believe it when I tell you this, and I want you to believe it. So I think giving this hope and this idea of America and translating that for him during this time where he remembers nothing else but the challenges of the past 4 years, and especially this year, the challenges of the pandemic, the racial crisis, the economic crisis that we faced. That's hard with our children because they don't remember. Some of you may have your children or older ones, but they don't know anything else. So I'm really trying to use my experience, share my story with him, and get him involved with everything that I'm doing so he can have that same hope and that same love that I have for this country.
Dr. Pressman, I'm curious, do you believe that this time will have a similar impact as what we saw around 9/11? As you know, and many young people went off to join the Army. They felt or military. I said Army because my dad was in the Army, bias there, but they joined the military. They looked for ways to activate, and we would track all of these young people who were in high school who then went on to serve. Do you think we'll see something similar, a call to action in those old enough, the teenagers?
I sure do. I mean, I have teenagers, so I'm paying extra attention right now. But one of the most beautiful things to come out of this certainly 2020, but just the last 4 years, has been this call to action, and culminating in the great moment of being able to say, because a lot of our kids were right there with us trying to make change and get the new administration in. Having the opportunity to say that work actually is moving and making a change was such a gift, because it actually showed every one of these kids, even the youngest of them, like, we just keep going because we can actually make a difference. So I'm very excited about this generation. I'm so moved by how passionate they are, and that they knew to enjoy the moment and then keep working, because we're just beginning.
And to Simona's point, much of what they will see will be because we have more exposure to mom working in the home than we ever imagined. I never imagined my kitchen would be the studio, and he would watch mom every single day, hour after hour, do her thing. As my husband said, mommy does her thing, and he gets to see that. Shannon, how have you balanced it? How have you had the conversations in your home? I would imagine that all day you don't walk around with a Mom's Demand action shirt. You are at some point, you take off your superhero t-shirt and you become mom in the pajamas. How do you talk, and how have you talked about these times?
Well, actually, I do wear this shirt all day. It's become like a
I knew you were
uniform.
going to
My
say that.
kids have said to me, like, could you take that off? But I actually have older kids, and had sent them away to college. I have 5 kids, 3 of them in college. They all came back home for months and months. And, it's look, there's so much suffering out there, and my suffering pales in comparison. But, I have a kid who got COVID. I have a daughter who has an eating disorder that was exacerbated by this crisis. And so there's just so much suffering going on right now. And I think it's a lesson to care about and help other people, and to put your own sort of situation in perspective. I can say that there's certainly been a lot of togetherness that we wouldn't have had otherwise, that I'm incredibly grateful for and wouldn't have had otherwise. it'll be interesting to see what impact this has, particularly on young adults. I keep hearing people talk about once the economy recovers and we're vaccinated, there may be a roaring 20s ahead of us. But in the meantime, we've got kids who aren't working, who want to be, who aren't in school, who want to be, and who may be really struggling with mental illnesses because of this isolation that they've experienced. And I think that's going to take years or even decades to figure out and fix.
Ajin, I asked Dr. Pressman about the letter to our children, as the intention of this. I'm curious, because you have been on the forefront of the women's movement, what would be the start of our letter to women, particularly women of color who've been disproportionately impacted, but also leaned in on more, it seems some days, when it came to the all-important vote and the change that the country wanted, or the majority wanted, I should say?
I would start with the line, "You are our future and our hope and our present." I think about the ways in which, oftentimes when people want to understand the future, they go to centers of power and influence like Washington, D.C., or Silicon Valley, or Hollywood, or Wall Street. And working with domestic workers who are overwhelmingly women of color, their experiences are such a window into the future in so many ways. I call domestic workers the original gig economy workers, because the dynamics that gig economy workers face of not having predictable hours or income, and not having access to a safety net, and just like not even knowing who your employer is, it's like an algorithm, that those conditions have been experienced by women of color for a very long time. And if we listened and looked at the world through their eyes, we would not only see better what are some of the threats and trends that could end up shaping the future for the whole of the country, but also what are the solutions and what are the things that can be done to democratize our economy, to strengthen our safety net, to make our democracy truly reflective of who we are as a country. And so every time I think about the power of our organizing, it's not just about winning for women of color. It is about how do we create a future, a multiracial democracy of the future that is truly reflective of the whole of who we are, and all of the ways that power and privilege shape our policies, our culture, so that we can start to undo them and create something new. And I would say that we need women of color at the forefront of that, because of the unique experience that they bring and the insight that they have on what's possible.
Picking up on that, Chriselle, the idea of creating and women being able to thrive on all levels, whether it's gig workers or people like yourself who create your business, going back to what we know as the numbers, when this is all over, as much hope as we've all cited and we believe is there, disproportionately businesses owned by women will be those that need us the most. When you see that, and you also recognize the opportunity that you've had to expand, what advice would you offer women that may not survive?
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly sad to see the past few months, see some of my favorite brands, women of color brands that have shut down. And these are brands that have been around for decades. And really just COVID changed everything up for them. And so moving forward, right, the question is, we all have to become intentional of where we're going to spend our dollars. We're going to spend our dollars for food, for necessities, for everything that we do anyways every day, right? And so the question I have for myself and even for my friends and family is, where can we use the dollars that we have? Because that's the power that we hold. It's right in our pocket, right? Where can we use these dollars to support the people that actually need it, right? And so that is something that we've become a lot more intentional with our local businesses that we love. We personally have a lot of friends that are business restaurant owners. And so now we're thinking, okay, where are we going to get dinner? Where are we going to get our lunch? Let's be thoughtful about where we're putting our dollars, because literally it all counts right now. And so I think all of us, how we can support one another, whether it be women-owned businesses or people of color, it's, take that extra step instead of just doing what you usually do. Challenge yourself to think about how you can support the people that actually need it during these times.
Shannon, I'll bring you back in because you have college-age children, and many of them will wonder, especially young women, where their place is now. Is it a place of power? Is the future really female in this most uncertain time that we live in? You think about, I tell people, the pandemic, the protests, if you could create a nightmare scenario, we are facing it. How do you assure or reassure your children that, they will not be left behind, that their concerns, that we will fix it? I don't know who the we are. I guess it's all of us and women like us. We've got to fix it, right? We've been trying to fix the gun issue in this country. We got to fix it all now.
I think what's apparent to young women is that they have to fix it themselves. And there's no reason, at least I hope women are realizing this, that holding office can't be a career, just like it has been for men, that they don't have to wait until they've had families and raise their children to run for office. The average age in this country is 47 for a woman to run. We hold about 17% of the 500,000 elected positions in this country. And as the saying goes, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are probably on the menu. And I think if nothing else, women in this country, and particularly Black and brown women, have realized that we are on the menu, whether it's the lack of reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, or just even what this last administration has looked like, almost all white men. And so I think that is an incredibly important lesson that young women will take with them, into their adulthood. And I hope that they will act on it by running for office. And the last thing I would say is, yes, it is very disappointing to see that even more white women voted for Joe Biden or for Donald Trump in this election than they did in 2016. However, the ray of hope I have is that when you look at the data around young voters under the age of 30, yes, white men under 30 still voted for Donald Trump by 6 points, but young white women voted for Joe Biden by 13. So maybe there is going to be a generational shift, and they will start listening to their Black and brown sisters and doing what is right for this country and for women.
Do you feel, Shannon, after the George Floyd murder and the visual of kids from all races on the streets around the country? I've covered Rodney King to Trayvon Martin to Tamir Rice. Sadly, the list goes on. I don't think, or as I recall, such a diverse and wide range of races and backgrounds. How did that feel for you seeing that?
I would agree. And look, this summer, in terms of gun violence, obviously George Floyd was killed by police, but not shot. But there was so many police shootings, and also the story of Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed by these racist vigilantes in Georgia. I mean, all of the stories this summer were so tragic and so heartbreaking. And what has been interesting for me to see in this movement, while yes, this next generation and the most diverse generation our country's ever had is certainly taking to the streets and acting, we are finally seeing an appetite among lawmakers for police reform legislation. And so that's another thing that it's on all of us to do, is to, as we enter a new year of legislative sessions across the country in state houses, to put pressure on our lawmakers to pass reforms that, for example, require body cameras or prevent chokeholds, all of these different things that are intuitive and should have been done a long time ago. And that is something that we all have an opportunity to do in this next year.
Simona, going back to your focus, which obviously is getting women in office, is this a reminder to us? I mentioned Trayvon Martin, I believe, his mother, Sabrina Fulton, decided to, put her focus on a life of politics, a life of making change on that level. We now know, of course, the president is important, but clearly what's happened in Georgia reminds us gubernatorial races matter, congressional races matter. All of these things from top to bottom matter, not just the individual in the White House. And it matters to have a woman in those positions like a Stacey Abrams who loses but doesn't give up her focus.
Yes, absolutely. We need women at all levels of our government, local, state, federal office. We do not have gender parity at any level of our government in the United States. And especially these local races that we oftentimes don't pay attention to, this is the future of our politics. These young, inspirational leaders who we are electing to these local offices are the leaders who are going to be running for Congress and higher offices hopefully later. So we absolutely need women at all levels of policymaking because we bring these very unique experiences to the policymaking table. And one of the big reasons I started Moms in Office, because I realized how underrepresented women are in politics, especially moms. And motherhood became this hurdle that kept women out of politics. It's just like Shannon mentioned, lawmakers, women do not start their political careers until their late 40s because motherhood keeps them out of office. Men start their political careers in their 30s. So by the time men get to these positions of power, they had so much more experience than women did because we do not give women the opportunity to gain experience in governing. So we absolutely need women at all levels of government. I was tired of having these conversations begin and end at my kitchen table. I realized that we need, if we want to see change, we need to have these conversations at the policymaking table. And oftentimes our elected officials forget who they speak for. We need to speak for those who don't have a voice. And women of working mothers do not have a voice. We have to give them a seat to make sure that we speak for them, that this is a priority. And these are exactly the reasons why we need women and mothers at the policymaking table, to bring these experiences and these priorities to the forefront so we can create the change for our children and our current and next generation that we so desperately need, with gun violence, with women's rights, violence against women, and I can keep listing the items that we know from firsthand experience, but so many of our elected officials do not.
Chriselle, I want to give it back to you. The letter to my children, the name of this panel. How would you start your letter?
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for seeing me at all levels and still loving me as your mom. For me personally, I always tried to keep a certain image, or so I thought, to my kids to make sure that they have this perfect image of mommy's always happy, mommy and daddy, they don't fight, they're in a good place. And of course, with the pandemic, all of us stuck at home, they saw all sorts of colors between mom and dad, and I think it was really good for them at the end of the day. I was so scared for them to see just all these different things, emotional battles that we're going through. But at the end of the day, I was able to have that conversation with them of, it's okay, we all have good days, we all have bad days, and we still love you, and I hope you still love us. And so I think it's brought a realness, and so that's how I would start my letter to my children.
Shannon, you were so kind to tell us about your daughter and her struggle and the things that are happening intimately in your home. I'm curious, do you recall what you said last to reassure any of your children? You could pick one or say them all. The last sit down thing that you can recall to reassure them that it's okay.
Just that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. that humanity at the end of the day is good and kind. And, there are scientists who are working to help us, and people trying to come to the rescue. And look, things may never be normal as we know them again. We can't promise that they will be. But that doesn't mean they won't get better. And it doesn't mean that we're going to feel the way we do right now forever. And also, I believe strongly, and certainly have learned this during my daughter's illness, that the best way to help yourself is to help others, and to get outside of yourself and to focus on the needs of other people. And it also helps you realize collectively that we're all in this together. And so I have great hope that the next generations will learn from what has happened from the administration, that we just spent 4 years suffering under, and that they will create a new day, a new and a different day, and that it will strive to be what America has always wanted to be and never really been able to accomplish. We can be a great nation, and I'm hopeful that this next generation will make that happen.
All of you started your organization, your work, along with being mothers, and we all have children at different ages, and people who are watching this probably have similar backgrounds. That's why they will be tuning into this panel. I would love to, and I know sometimes moderators do this because they run out of questions, and Lord knows I've got about 3,000 more I could ask, but it's always important to ask, what do you believe I missed? Jen, what did I miss that you want people to know here?
One thing I was thinking about as we were talking is my friend Tarana Burke, who's the founder of the Me Too movement. She often talks about how we think about healing over here and action over here, but in reality that there is healing in action, and action is healing. And for us to be thinking about how we move through this time that is so difficult and has been so traumatic for our kids, for our families, for our entire country, that there is healing inside of the action that we take to make it better, and to be protagonists in shaping the future, and that we should think of those things as connected. Like, let us take care of ourselves, be compassionate and kind to ourselves and to each other, but also let's take action.
Let's take action. Dr. Pressman, what would you want those watching now to know?
Well, that made me, one thing is that Chriselle said something that is so important for all parents to remember and all caregivers to remember, which is that whole idea that we should be perfect or could be perfect for our kids was never a gift to our kids. They have to see there are many different feelings and waves and experiences that we have, and that relationships have discord all the time. It's the repair that makes us learn how to be healthy and grow. And so if anything, all of the perfect parents out there finally were like, you know what, forget it. Like, cat's out of the bag, I'm not perfect. And I think there's a generation of kids that actually love themselves a whole lot more because they weren't under some kind of illusion that there was this perfect thing they could never get to. So that is something important to hold on to for this, because I think it's a positive. And also that, you know, there's going to be a lot of big feelings, and a lot of strange things have gone on, and a lot of different reactions, and that when you honor all of them, that all of those are welcome. All behaviors are not welcome, but all feelings are welcome. You can support kids in a way that will help them thrive throughout life. I mean, we know from neuroscience that kids can experience, we don't want them to, but they can experience a tremendous amount of stress if they have the loving support of at least one caregiver. And that is so powerful. And I just hope that in the context of all of this bad stuff happening in front of our kids and to our kids, that we can remember that, because that's where I think there really is tremendous hope.
Beautiful. Shannon, your final thought. What do you want those watching to know, the moms watching to know?
You know, if I have learned anything over the last year, the 8 years with this amazing grassroots movement of Moms Demand Action volunteers, it is really that mothers have so much power they may not realize. You know, we don't necessarily have a seat at the table legislatively. We're only about 5% of Fortune 1000 CEOs, but we have very important levers of power that we can pull. Our voices and our votes were we're more than half of the majority of the voting public, and also, you know, our spending power and our ability to I think galvanize our families and communities. And we have to pull the levers of power available to us right now, but I am really heartened to see more and more women and moms running for office. 37 of our own volunteers ran up and down the ballot. We have now 2 Moms to Win Action volunteers in Congress. I think a new day is dawning, and it's one that will be hopefully run by women.
Oh, I love that. Simona, since you were the Mom of the Year, California 2020, I'll give you the last word here. What would you like no pressure, what would you like your final thought and I guess, you know, your final wisdom to share with those watching?
Yes, and I would like to mention about Mom of the Year. I always pointed out that I'm not Mom of the Year because I'm better than anyone. I am just like everyone else, and I need to accept this honor so I can use my voice and platform for those who really need my voice to speak for them. And when I started Moms in Office, just like Shannon started her organization, who has been a big inspiration for me, she was the mom, and I was a single mom, and I still am just a single mom, but I have a voice, and I believe that the voice matters, and that's all I needed. I had many questions that came after that. The aha moment came, the oh no, what have I done moment. Can I really do this? But I would like to tell all moms and women at home who either are considering running for office or considering becoming more active in organizations or starting their own. Activism does not require expertise. Activism does not require deep political knowledge. It requires that you care. That you care about unity, that you care about your children and their future, our democracy, and our country. So as long as you care, you can do this, and never question yourself whether you can do it. Go ahead and start whatever you want to do now, because we need everyone to speak up, because so many working moms, as we heard today, can't speak for themselves right now.
You know, we are wrapping up, and before we leave, you said single mom. I interviewed the great Jill Scott, the performer, today, and someone said, you know, she's a single mom, and I said, you know, repeated what was told to me, and she said, no, I have a village helping me. We're not single at anything. Single is one. None of us will let a woman who is within our reach that we can help go through any of this alone. So I applaud all of the work that each of you do to remind the women out there who feel alone, whether that's through domestic violence, through the work they do as gig workers, as in-home workers, they're not alone. And people like you are fighting to make sure they know that. So congratulations on the success you've had. Thank you for all the wisdom. And thank you for sharing. I'm actually very nervous because I feel that I'm in the presence of people who change and save lives. So thank you all. And thank you so much to the Power Women Summit 2020. Enjoy the rest of your day.